Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're watching this special edition of LinkedIn Live. It's Saturday, and we are doing LinkedIn Live for a wonderful reason. My name is Naishad Gadani, and I'm the founder of Your Career Down Under, which is in Australia. Currently, I'm in India, locked down for another 2.5 weeks. Um, uh, your career down under specializes in helping skilled migrants and international graduates find job, build their careers, and realize their Australian dreams. And it gives me an immense pleasure to welcome a migrant who have landed a job in these tough times, or in this, as a lot of people say, in the Corona times. And that really excites me. As I said in my LinkedIn post, it's it's a personal victory for me. Not that I have, not that Karthik is a client of mine, but whenever a migrant gets a job, it just lifts my heart, and I'm pretty sure that for many other people who work in the space, because it just a great step towards the integration process, in Australian society. So Karthik, welcome to Your Career Down Under LinkedIn Live.
Yep. Thank you for having me, Nashad.
So Karthik is also, not locked down like me. He can still go and work. So Karthik, before we start, why don't you give people, a bit of background, about yourself, where you came from, what sort of vocation that you are in, so that people can, and then we can kick off the discussion in much more insightful, meaningful way.
Definitely. So, my journey started in India. I did my schooling in India. My first job was in India as well, with Infosys. I'm sure everybody knows Infosys. It's a global player in the software services and solutions industry. So I joined Infosys, and then from there, I went to the US,
Mm.
on work assignment. Interestingly, when I first landed in the US, it was right in the middle of the economic crisis,
Mm.
the start of the
Mm.
recession in
Yeah.
2008. So we swam through that and survived that. And I stayed there and settled down in the U.S. Stayed there for the last 11 years. Uh,
Mm.
Things as far as immigration is concerned was not heading in the right direction. So
Sure.
I felt the need to make a change. So that's how Australia happened. Obviously, Australia is welcoming to skilled migrants, and applied for my permanent residency in Australia. I got that, and we made the decision as a family to move to Australia last year.
Yeah.
And we, after spending 11 years, you build a huge social circle, your friends,
Yeah.
family, everybody, back home in the US. But we
Yeah.
had to make the decision personally for our family. So we did
Sure.
that, and we moved here to Melbourne in December of last year. So my wife, she landed a job within the first week of us landing here.
Mhm.
I took a little bit of time to find the right role and opportunity, and happy to report that I started my job last week. So that's kind of a short version of my
Yeah.
story
Yeah.
so far. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting because you came or you went to US, during the time of global financial crisis, and you came to Australia at the time where it is much bigger than global financial crisis, what we are going through, not in terms of just the jobs, but the medical crisis, the humanitarian crisis. It's just mind-boggling. So obviously, you have personally experienced that, and you can probably draw some parallels. And how did you respond to those sort of crises personally? So if you can you draw some parallels between them? How did you respond to the crisis in 2008-9, and how are you seeing that now personally?
Absolutely. So, what is a crisis, right? I mean, how do you define a crisis? A crisis is, at its core, uncertainty. At its
Okay.
core is anxiety, the fear of the unknown, right? So people
Yeah.
become fearful. Um,
Mm.
yes, I mean, we always face crisis every day. When we step out of the house, who knows, right? I mean, we are driving, and anything could happen, but we
Yeah.
we don't internalize that. But then when
Yeah.
things start falling apart around you,
Yeah.
automatically, we become more anxious. That
Yeah.
anxiety translates into fear, and
Yeah.
that fear then translates into the actions that we take, right, to
Yeah.
protect ourselves. So, when I was in the US and the economic crisis was happening,
Yeah.
again, it was really disheartening to see jobs being lost, my
Yeah.
own friends losing their jobs.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I was in a project that was critical, and we had to deliver it, and thereby I was able to stay there and then continue providing my services. But what I noticed is, in times of crisis, it is
Mm.
very important to not just do your job, but also keep your sanity, enjoy the
Yeah.
little things, the little moments. That really, pulls you through that phase. So the same parallel is what I'm seeing. I am no way, shape, or form comparing the global economic
Yeah.
recession that happened in 2008 and
Yeah.
this. These are two different beasts altogether.
Yeah.
But at the core of it, the anxiety part, the fear part is still
Yeah.
the common denominator.
Yeah.
What has, I guess, I had that primer before.
Yeah.
So coming into this, I knew what news I had to take in,
Mm.
and what I had to filter out, and how to embrace things that would really keep things in perspective, right? So that's really how I have been able to cope with the crisis, not kind of heeding into what the majority of the people
Yeah.
are doing, but rather
Yeah.
approaching things pragmatically, and being patient, and watching and waiting, and making sure that we are doing the right thing, and above all,
Yeah.
having a process, and following that
Yeah.
process without
Yeah.
without wavering from that. So that's kind of what I see. I mean, one
Excellent.
as parallels, and two, I'm adopting all those learnings that I had,
Yeah.
back in 2008, and kind of applying it in places that are applicable in this time,
Yeah. Yeah.
here in Australia.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. If I can, sort of, because obviously when I moved in, or went to Australia, we did not have at that time 2007. At that time, we did not have that much information available to me about the market, about what to expect, what to how to prepare myself and everything else. But obviously, things have changed now. Now you've got much more sophisticated information available to yourself. Now, if I can probably get you back, when let's say that you got your visa, and now it is confirmed that now you'll be moving to Australia. What kind of preparation did you started to do? So one, in my view, preparation I describe in two ways. One is a mental preparation, whether you're mentally ready to take that transition, and second is the logistics, is around whether you have got your resume, you've got LinkedIn presence, you are increasing your LinkedIn network, you are talking to people and things like that. So if you can outline some of the preparation that you have done, Karthik, for the audience.
Definitely. So, first off, each situation is different, right?
Mm.
Every person's, migration strategy or plan is different. The
Mm.
advantage that our family had was this is not the first time we were migrating to a new country other than our home country. So the mental preparation to move to a new country was, pretty natural. It was a natural transition. Both America and Australia are English-speaking countries, so we were kind of well versed with the Western culture, albeit, knowing the local nuances is always there. So the mental part of preparing to move was set, right? So then getting into the logistics, right? Like, what do we need to do? So we have to wind up a decade of our life in America. So that was number one. So making sure that we are able to liquidate our assets, making sure that we have all those things that we need to take care of there being taken care in a certain timeline, right? And then the second part is planning to move here and strategizing as to how we can move, make the transition seamless, not just job, right? So let me come to how I look at moving to a new country. It is threefold, right? Firstly, you need to first address the why. Why are you moving to a new country, right? Be it moving from India, be it moving from the Middle East, be it moving from, because we have a lot of people who would have stayed in other countries and they're moving to Australia, right? So addressing the why is really important. For me, the why was very simple, right? I wanted to make sure that I live and work in a country where my talents are valued and I get permanency, right? And I already had that in Australia. So the why was really addressed. From there emerges what you want to do in that new country, how you want to create a fulfilling life for yourself, right? So then I focused on that. What kind of jobs do we need to do in order for us to lead a nice, comfortable life and also a fulfilling life, right? So that then translated into what's my story, right? Who I am, what I have to contribute, and how that contribution will then tie back into what I want from life, right? All of this put together creates this story, or rather creates this this narrative that you have and that you carry, which is true, which is, it's not a made-up narrative, it's your narrative, it's your story. So that was the first step, right? The second step was, timeline. Most people, at least I have come in touch with here, have just made the move the moment they got a PR. They decided, oh yeah, I have a PR, so I can just move. They would probably have gone on Seek and they would see 17,000 jobs available in Melbourne, and so naturally anybody would be tempted to move, right? Our planning phase was about 6 months. We decided to move we decided in June that we want to move, and we put a date of when we will be moving, and that was in December, right? So giving yourself that cushion meant that, okay, I have enough planning time to be able to draw out all aspects of, who am I, what am I going to do, my financial, security, right? To be able to sustain myself. So we gave ourselves 6 months. We should be able to go there, give ourselves 6 months to a year, and have enough liquidity to, survive through that period, right? So once we did that, then we got a clarity in terms of, okay, we can survive for a year. We know that this is the place we want to be, and these are the jobs that we want to kind of target, right? Then comes the networking part. So I started reaching out. I started out with one friend that I knew in Sydney, and from her, that list started growing. I would just pretty shamelessly reach out to long lost friends, people who have not spoken for years, but their friend is here, and I'm like, hey, connect me to them, right? Just to get perspectives. All I did was listen. Got perspectives. Everybody had their own little narrative about how their journey was, and each was different. So you take those perspectives in, and then you kind of create, your understanding of this country that you've never stepped through. Right? Then, of course, there are online resources. So we kind of did divide and conquer. So, my wife did most of the online research. I did most of the people connection. By doing that, what happened was we were able to, create this pool of people that, had a diverse, background, right? Some friends, some were just acquaintances that gave us perspectives. And somewhere, prospective employers, recruitment consultants, career coaches, what have you, right? Wide list of people. So everyone had
Sure.
their own perspective of things, and that helped us kind of formulate the plan that will then lead us to, creating networks. And finding a job is, if I may use this analogy, right, it's like arranged marriage in India, right? Both sides are looking for certain bullet points in each other,
Yeah.
right? Not a one-way street. So we kind of use that approach to say, these are all the things that I have to offer, and these are all the things that I am looking for, and then approached people, and that was all the pre-work, right? We didn't apply for any jobs from America or from India.
Yeah.
It was all about
Yeah.
reaching out and say, hey, I'm moving in December. These are my skill sets. I'd love to stay connected and we'll chat. Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was our approach until the point we landed here. So there was a lot of planning and a lot of pre-work that went into the move. If that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's like a project.
Absolutely. And that's what I do for a living. So I love doing that. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's very important. A couple of other things that I really liked is that listen.
Yes.
It's obviously it's difficult as a human for us to attentively to listen to people and not to make judgments about it. And secondly is that you made the initial interactions with people very light touch, not too much going out that let's do this, and I think that in a way works in my view, because then you are not creating that unnecessary pressure on people, that when Karthik comes in, I have to meet him, I have to find this, that pressure itself really keeps people away. But what I've observed over a period of time is that if you don't give pressure to people, and if you give freedom to people to say yes or no, they are most likely to say yes, because you've given them the freedom to say no. So that's really great. Another thing if I want to ask, obviously you have heard, because I think your wife did most of the online research, so she would have shared with you the not so great stories about finding a job in Australia. Whether that's online or whether that's through friend. How did that kind of impact you? Either way, I'm not so much looking at positive or negative impact, but how did that impact you and your wife's transition?
Right. So, one of our online research led us to this really unique blog of this person who traveled from Australia. She's an Australian who traveled and started living in LA, right? With her kids. So that blog gave us a really unique perspective about Australia, right? Australia is a very diverse country. It's a large country, but the population is centered around 5 cities. So we really need to look at Australia as 5 separate countries with its own subcultures. So, and I know this might sound very offbeat, but Perth is different from Adelaide, is different from Melbourne, is different from Sydney, is different from Hobart, is different from Brisbane, right?
Yeah.
So that applies for everything. That applies for way of life. That applies for the way they work. That applies for the way the job market itself is. So one thing we understood right off the bat is Melbourne, the job market is very, very network based. It is not as simple as just, yes, I'm not saying online jobs are available. Yes, they are, and you can apply. But we noticed a distinct flavor when it came to jobs in Melbourne, particularly, is that network and having a strong network is really important. And network not for the sake of finding a job, but network for the sake of network, right? Having those common denominators is key, because Melburnians, now I can say, want to be able to stand each other. I mean, that's kind of their MO, So even at workplace, you might not tick all the boxes, but they want to be able to see you every day and have those chats over the coffee
Yeah.
machine, right? So that knowing that and understanding that was really a key factor for us, because then I knew that it was pointless for me to start applying for 150 jobs or 200 jobs online, because it's not going to lead anywhere. But instead, making those true human connections, with people who are on the ground here, and taking that time, right? Even with recruitment consultants, I when I met them, I told them, hey, this is who I am. This is what I bring to the table. If you've got any opportunities coming your way, let me know. By when do you want to get a job? I said, I have no timeline, right? 3 months, 6 months, a year. Right job is what I want, right? That aligns with my
Yeah.
skill sets. And also, I need to be able to provide value to your client. So whenever that happens, it could happen tomorrow, but having that narrative was the key. So understanding those nuances is really important, because not everybody is migrating into Melbourne, right? I mean, you're going to see a lot of people migrating to regional areas. So you cannot take one set of formulae that you have for a city and then apply it across Australia, because it just doesn't work that way. I mean, at least that's my perspective. I might be wrong. Just my perspective.
Okay, and in terms of the what you mentioned about the nuances, which is pretty sort of accurate. I remember I actually went to Brisbane when I came from went to from India straight away to Brisbane. I lived there for 3 days only, and then I went to Melbourne for interviews that I had. And even in 3 days, I could sense the difference between the way people talk, in Brisbane, and how people responded and reacted, in Melbourne. So I fully agree with you. One of the things that I always say to new migrants, or people who in fact been living here for some time, is to invest in your education on Australian society, in Australian politics and Australian businesses. So I always tell my clients to listen to ABC Radio, right, which is an amazing place for you to understand the issues that Australians or Melbournians or Victorians are facing. What's what premier is saying, what prime minister is saying, and what business leaders are saying, what are the issues. And I think that is since I think I've been listening to radio, Australian, talkback radio since 2009, and I have got a really great understanding of various aspects in politics that Australia is going through, business issues and everything else. And I can strike conversation with people without scratching my head, because it's natural. I know things, a little bit more detail, and that's what I recommend. And I think your study, shows, that just naturally prepares you, that you don't feel when you suddenly walk into a coffee shop, you don't feel, this greeting sounds weird. Well, you've read about it, you can expect it, and that's very critical to your migration experience, isn't it?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
So now let's talk about the employment side, because that's what a lot of people would want to know. So obviously, you've got a raft of skills that you've developed in last 11 years before you came to Australia.
Yep.
How did you where did you find to position yourself? What did you do to find out, what, this is my position? What kind of thinking did you do before?
Sure. So, when people talk about positioning in the market, the first thing that comes to mind is titles, right? Each country has designations and titles in their workplace, and they mean one thing or another. But once you look past those, you really see what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. That's what really defines who you are, right? So again, the question is not outward. The question was inward, right?
Mm,
Who I am, what I really do for a living, and what am I good at, and
mm,
how is it that I am differentiating from the rest of the crowd, right? So
mm,
looking, introspecting, and really understanding myself, and what I'm good at, and how that will benefit any organization. Uh,
yeah.
Created that message, right? So I'm always someone who brings varied group of people together. I like to ideate, even the wildest of ideas, and then bring that out into actual tangible outcomes. Now, if you look at my LinkedIn, that's exactly the message that I'm portraying.
Mm,
I'm not creating a summary for the sake of it, right? But
mm,
actually, I'm resonating who I truly am. So finding that was the key. So for me, that was naturally in the project management or the management consulting
mm,
space. That's my background. I bring IT and businesses together and make things happen.
mm,
So that's how I position myself. Now, that can translate into many different roles here in the Australian context, right? That could be somebody who's a senior BA, but also does some PM tasks. It could be an out and out IT project manager. It could be a senior project manager who is more business focused, right? But all of these still, fits into the realm of things that I have to offer, right? So that's how I position myself. Then the roles that I started going after fell into those buckets. So I would not look at
sure.
the title of the role, but really the responsibilities of the role.
Mm,
And I used to ignore the last three lines of every job ad because they're all cut and pasted. I would focus on really the job description, and how that aligns squarely to what I have done and what I've been
mm,
doing. So that was my strategy. Same thing with my wife as well. I mean, we
sure.
both follow the same strategy.
Yeah.
Does that
And
answer
look,
your question?
yeah, absolutely. I think that, you touch upon a very interesting point around, looking inward, rather than outward. But first, you look at inward, and then you look at, where do you kind of fit in, in the marketplace. But another thing, interesting thing that you talk about is what you can contribute. It's like thinking like an entrepreneur, that if I am a product or a service, where what problems do I solve for companies? What do I bring? What solutions do I provide? And having that thinking is very important, because then you can have that kind of conversation with people. You're not saying that I'm a you're not bound by titles, but you're bound by, or you're gravitating more towards the problems you can solve rather than the job titles in a way. And I think your point around various countries have different titles is also a very very important to understand. There's a lot of resumes that I see coming from subcontinent. I remember a resume that I got which says in-house consultant
Right.
in the job title, and I said,
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by in-house consultant, and people will have absolute no understanding what it means. And I'm not saying that you have not done the work required, but then you got to contextualize or Australianize your job title to make it more meaningful for Australian employers, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that applies not just for Australia.
Yeah,
That applies for
yeah,
any country that you're
for
migrating to.
everyone. Yeah, yeah. So let's say that you came here, now you found that this is what I want to do. How did you go about? Because obviously you've been told multiple times that networking is the best way to find work. There are hidden jobs, blah blah blah, and there is just enormous amount of information. So tell us, how did you go about in doing that? And what I really want to find out, Karthik, is that what did your day look like? Because you're a project manager, and you would, if you're working in a company, you do that, this day this will happen, this day this will happen. So did you manage it like a project, and how did your day really look like?
So sure, yeah, that's a very interesting question, but it also goes back to the time of my arrival here, right? So we
Yeah.
as a family arrived here in the second week of December.
Mm,
Things were starting to shut down in Australia for the most part. So by the time we moved into our apartment, we got all of our other logistics placed, phone and bank accounts and whatnot. Things were really shutting down. So pretty
yeah.
much all the I had 3 or 4 really top recruitment consultants that I had already interacted with. I'd already said that, hey, I'm going to be there so and so
Yeah.
time, and I'm going to meet you. They all came back to me and said, let's meet in January, right?
Yeah.
So at that point, I was not going to focus my energy in job search. So then what I did was December, I used LinkedIn to kind of understand what is going on, just to
Yeah.
understand the market landscape, what people are doing differently, how much LinkedIn plays a part in the Australian
Mm,
work context. Now,
mm,
I have to tell you that in Australia, what I found surprising was LinkedIn is being used by a huge population of
mm,
people, right? I mean, I don't see that in the US. So
mm,
that's when I decided, yes, I need to shore up my LinkedIn profile. So I
mm,
did my own bit, and then I reached out to people for free advice. Hey, could you review my profile and maybe give me some feedback? And I've had some really generous people going out of their way and telling me what to do and what not to do.
yeah.
Right? That was number one. Two, I diversified my my networking. Right,
Mm,
there was job focused networking, yes, but I also focused on community activity based networking. I have some hobbies, and I wanted to create a network for those as well. So that kind of kept me occupied through that holiday period. Right.
mm,
Once that happened, by then I was also in parallel working on Australifying my resume, creating a LinkedIn, and then unifying that message. Whatever message that I have in my resume to whatever message I truly carry to whatever message I have in LinkedIn,
mm,
they all need to speak the same language, and I was
mm,
trying to do that. Now, once that happened, once we got into the January timeframe, I met all of those recruitment consultants. I had a select 4 to 5 recruitment consultants that I met. I gave them where I'm coming from, what I'm
yep.
looking for specifically. Right, I did not want to say I can be a business analyst, I can be a project manager, I can be that. No, it simply doesn't work. You've got to be able to say what are your target jobs. And I've been told also by some consultants that I think your BA skills are better than your PM skills, and that's
Mm,
okay. That's their opinion, but that doesn't still change what you are and what you want to do, right? So
yeah.
that was one side of things. I did not apply for a lot of jobs online. In fact, I mean, this is going to come as a surprise, but I applied 0 jobs on Seek,
Okay.
and I only applied for jobs through the actual company websites, and
Mm,
I didn't have much success, for most of those jobs. But after Australia Day, things started opening up. People started coming back to work, and these recruitment consultants that I was in touch with, a couple of them came back and said, hey, there is a job for which I think we need to forward your resume. So that's how it came about. So it's a combination of things I saw online, things I learned from meetups, networking events, whatnot. I also went to a personal branding event where I understood, other nuances of what I need to do. I have not done an elevator pitch in 15 years, right? So I wanted to work on that. So all of those came about because when I went for my first interview, I was already prepared. Now that didn't go through, or that didn't work out positively, or rather, to my advantage. I didn't go to the next round, but it also gave me a window into how things are going to look like, right?
mm,
And then, my second interview is what led me into my job. So my success rate was fairly high, but the reason it was high was because I filtered all of the other stuff that I shouldn't be doing and focused on things that I knew were going to translate into successes, right? And of course, there's luck plays a huge part, timing plays a huge part. I mean, all of that is there, but having that clarity of thought of, creating a process, trusting that process, and sticking to that process really was what I would say translated into, getting through to an interview.
Yeah, yeah, excellent. So your classic example of, you got to sharpen the saw, before you start to chop the tree, because the more the preparation that you have done, it ultimately pays off, on the battleground or on that. So, as we are wrapping up this, what are a few things that you highly recommend, for two groups of people? One is, there might be group of people who are now migrating to Australia, and
Yes.
second group of are migrants who are right now in Australia and are still not have not found the
Yeah.
job. What are your advice for both of them?
Sure. So, first I'll start with people who are yet to migrate, right? So 2020 is a very weird year. So you probably don't know when you can migrate. So that's number one.
Yeah.
But even with all that, let's say we get through this hump and we're on the other side. I think focusing on the three pillars that I discussed earlier is the key, right? One is what you want from life and why you are moving to this new country. Two, how well you are financially placed to survive without a job. And then three, and this is something I tell to all migrants, right? You're not a migrant anymore. You are a permanent resident. The moment you step foot into the Australian shores, you are one among Australians. If we don't get that into our minds, we will never be able to truly integrate in all aspects: social, economical, political, and civical, right? So these are all different aspects of integration. So understanding all this prior to landing here is what's going to create higher successes, right? So if you're not there yet, don't even book that flight ticket, right? So that's my advice to people who are yet to migrate. And then there are plenty of people who are getting permanent residency and they're anxious and they're hopeful, and that's great. But then you need to do that pre-work, and that is going to create more successes than coming here and trying out the same things and expecting different results, right? For people who are already here now, I've met, through some meetups that I've had, met fellow job seekers, and unfortunately, I feel, now that I'm in that position to state that. The term job seeker kind of puts you in a box. I mean, you are labeled, right? So that's just one aspect of who you are. Don't call yourself a job seeker. We all need a job. We all need to pay our bills. But being just a job seeker is not your identity, right? You are someone here to contribute. So first, bringing that mindset change is important. That's number one. Two, these are trying times. Things are going to be difficult. There is no point in becoming anxious and depressed about that. And just what it is. Now, I would be speaking the same way even if I didn't have a job, because that's what adversity does to you, right? I mean, you need to pull through. You need to become strong mentally, right? So knowing that, acknowledging that, and preparing yourself for the tough times will keep you in better stead, right? And then thirdly, again, targeted networking, right? Focus on the people that are truly giving back to you, right? After coming here, my network has grown from say 650 to about 1,500 now. I have knocked on many doors. Some have opened, some have welcomed me in, some have not even bothered to answer the door. But don't stop knocking on doors, right? Talk to as many people with the intent to talk, not with the intent to get something. That will always lead to something, right? And then lastly, applying for jobs. I mean, that's where I think people are like, okay, talking about all this, but how am I going to get a job?
Yeah.
Job is
Mm.
a consequence of all the actions that I just said that you are going to take, right? It's
Mm.
just a byproduct. It's just an output of all of
Mm.
this that, you're here to stay as a permanent resident, as a
Yeah.
migrant, you're here to stay. And unfortunately, I don't think I can address, people who are on student visas or people who are on,
Sure.
uh, short-term visas. I mean, that's not my situation. But specifically focusing on people who are on permanent resident visa, I think you're here to stay. You are a permanent
Yeah.
resident, so you're not here for the short game. You're here for good. So if we start thinking like that, automatically our perspective will change, and then
Yeah.
our job search strategy is going to change from a job
Yeah.
seeker to a value adder, right? How can I
Yeah.
add value to the company in this kind of so like last week we didn't have enough staff in our office. I changed a couple of light bulbs. So if I guess what I'm trying to say is there are opportunities, plenty of opportunities out
Yeah.
there, plenty of good people out there who are willing to
Yeah.
help. um, we need to identify those people, and
Yeah.
good things will happen.
Excellent, excellent. Well, on that positive note, Karthik, once again, thank you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. And I'm pretty sure that some of the things that you shared are really, really insightful, and more or less, they are practical things. They are things that people, can do and should be doing. So, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story, and I wish you all the success in your career, and you become, great at what you do. um, you know for those listeners, please stay well, stay healthy, and stay safe. That's the message that I have for all of you. I'll be back again on LinkedIn Live on your pretty with this pretty face again on Monday 3 p.m., where me and Caroline are going to start another week of LinkedIn Live with some amazing guests that we are going to host them. So, Karthik, again, thank you very much, and you have a lovely Saturday afternoon.
Thank you for having me, Arshad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.